I grew up firstly at a place called Lake Boga in Swan Hill, where we had a property there. And then I came down here in 1944. I went away to school. I went away to overseas for a couple of years and eventually lobbed back home in 1960. That was quite an incredible mark in time. I guess before 60, if you drank wine, you had a problem. And as we know, a few of us have still got that problem. However, wine drinking was very much looked down on. Virtually the only wines drunk at that stage were fortified wines. But from 1960 onwards, there was an enormous boom in the drinking of table wines. I'm not too sure where it came from. A lot of people put this down to the fact we had a lot of migrants at that stage, but I don't believe they had much influence at that time. I think a lot of the Europeans who migrated to Australia, their influence has been much higher probably in the 80s and 90s than it was initially in the early 60s. But certainly in the 60s, Australia started to drink wine. When I came home at that time, if we think about a few things, for example, I think we may have had our first little tractor in the vineyard, and a lot of the vineyard work was still done by horses. We had no stainless steel, very little laboratory equipment, certainly didn't use any new oak. We had limited power supplies, so a lot of our pumping was still done by hand. Pressing was done by hand, picking was done by hand, everything was done by hand. All your grape handling was done by hand. If you had to shift grapes from point A, you used a shovel. Presses were all hand presses. There are just so many things that we just take for granted today. I mean, I remember always going around the cellar with candles. I think we did have a limited amount of power. I really don't remember, but certainly the changes from when I first came home to today has been quite massive. Quite interesting. Last year I had my 50 successive vintage, which I think is probably quite a feat. It's a long time, and I've certainly seen a lot of changes in that time.